Welcome to a homegrown family podcast where we grow the produce and the kids.
Hello everyone, welcome to a homegrown family podcast. I'm your host Joe Metler, and thank you all for listening today. Homegrown Family Podcast, a podcast where we talk about anything from mushroom hunting, traveling to Rome with kids, to maple syrup, to raising sheep, winemaking, all sorts of different things. If you can recall, if you're a previous listener, we had recently talked about, not recently, it's been like a year or two, maybe, something like that, but I had an episode called the Dehydrator Checklist. Okay, in that episode, I pretty much talked about what types of things I wanted in a dehydrator. I wanted stainless steel, I wanted even drying, I wanted, some volume and square footage, and all these other little things that I was kind of interested in, accessories when you sold, price point, and all this stuff. So that kind of came down to the Magic Mill model, MFD, the 1098 model. Then the Bench Foods dehydrator, which primarily makes commercial dehydrators, has now come up with a line for more personal use. And I liked what they had there as well, but got the Magic Mill. So in this episode, I've now had a year or so of experience using this, Magic Mill dehydrator. So I kind of want to go through and talk about the different things that I've used and put in the dehydrator and dried down and ultimately consumed its goodness. So here we are. I'm going to go through a couple things. So ultimately, first thing I think about when I think of dehydrating food is I go, fruit, right? I can dehydrate apples or oranges or things like that. Make fruit leather, or jerky. Those are all things that come to mind really quickly for me when I think about dehydrating food. So that's kind of where I'm going to go with this. So one of the first things I tried was apple slices. I had a bag of apples and I'm like, okay, well, these are starting to get a little bit soft. So I'm like, let's put one in the dehydrator and see what happens. And so I left the apples unpeeled. And so the skins were on the apples. Cut them roughly to 3/8 of an inch thick. Try to be as uniform as possible, as much as you can with hand cutting, and a knife. Turn the dehydrator on to 140 degrees. And then I had it on for about 8.5 hours. And I was really surprised. My daughter actually really loved these dehydrated apples. I don't think it lasted more than like 2 days, So the apples, slices, dehydrated to 3/8 of an inch thick were a big hit. More than I thought they would be. They're actually pretty interesting to consume as well. I kind of had a jar sitting next to my office desk, and I'd pull them out every once in a while and chew on some as well. So apple slices, I'll do that again, especially since we have access to lots and lots of apples, and they don't always last the longest, right? The other thing I want to try was mandarin oranges. Those small little cuties, as they call them or whatever. Well, you peel those open, and then next thing you know, the slices aren't all the same thickness, right? Some of them, are a little bit thicker than others, and so it wasn't as easy and straight to the point. And the apples, 8.5 hours, took them off, they're all done. Mandarin oranges, also at 140 degrees. The oranges are a little bit more juicy compared to the apples, and so I expected that they're going to take longer. The smaller slices, that after you're done peeling smaller slices, we're getting done in like 12 hours. And by 14 hours, probably half of the mandarin oranges were done. And then by about 15 hours, I was able to take off all the rest of the mandarin oranges, the bigger slices included, I don't know if I'd do the mandarin oranges again unless I had a bag that was starting to go bad or something like that, or really needed to just dehydrate them. I don't know, they're okay. And one thing I did to kind of try to make it more interesting was in a couple of the trays, I took some spices, like some cinnamon or allspice or some cloves. Kind of did a couple different racks of various spices and things. I kind of sprinkled those on the oranges prior to dehydration, and I did prefer, maybe the ones with the cloves and spices on them compared to the oranges / mandarin oranges, cuties, plain. So there was that. And for the most part, the apples were all pretty consistent. The mandarin oranges, different sizes, not quite as consistent. And I also kind of had to pick and choose the smaller ones that are getting done, taking them off, right? Both of these situations, I never did rotate the racks around. And overall, I've had really good luck with this dehydrator drying things evenly. When it comes to other things I'll talk about, like fruit leather or jerky, those all dry super evenly. Didn't have to worry about, rotating the racks around or anything like that, which was kind of nice. And one thing I did want when I looked at a dehydrator, I wanted that rear mounting fan for a more even heat distribution. So, yeah, kind of moving along the same lines of fruit. Bananas, I like bananas, but oftentimes when I get bananas, actually, let's back up just a little bit. I just remember one other thing about oranges. So the other thing I did is I did take full oranges and just sliced them into like a 1/4 inch thick. I ended up hanging them up on my Christmas tree because back in the day, when you were given an orange, they weren't as readily accessible, and they're a sign of wealth and prosperity and things. So if you hang them, I think there's an old tradition where you hung them on your tree, it was kind of just like a good omen, I guess you could say, or something like that. So we did end up putting some of those on our Christmas tree and dehydrating those. And once they got good and crispy, I don't remember how much time it was, but I think I did like the 140 degrees Fahrenheit again. Cut them into slices, put them on there, and then they didn't get moldy or anything throughout the whole entire Christmas season. Throughout the whole entire time we had our tree up, and those were all done around the same time as well. Very even. So now bananas. I'm a fan of bananas, but oftentimes I get a bag of bananas, or a bunch of bananas, and I eat 2 or 3, and next thing you know, I kind of forget about it, and you got to throw them in the freezer to use them for banana bread later, which I also enjoy. But I like my bananas a little more on the green side, so you get them past the greenish point, and then you get this softer banana, which I tend not to eat as much. My kids will kind of continue to eat, but then it turns brown. And so in that middle period is when I took these bananas and I kind of sliced them. Kind of try to get, 3/8 of an inch or so, thick. And then I also put those in at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And it took about 15 hours for the bananas to dry down. Like I was surprised at how long it took the bananas to dry down for this stuff. And then when they finally did dry down and didn't feel squishy in the middle, they're pretty hard. And I think if I were to try bananas again, that I'd get it closer to like 1/4 of an inch and get some thinner slices so they just dry down a little bit faster. I think that would definitely be more beneficial. So I wasn't a super fan of bananas. They got a bit hard for me. And out of those 3 fruits, my daughter liked the apple slices the best. And I would slowly nibble and munch on the oranges, but the bananas were always in the bottom of the jar. If I had to mix them all together and put them in a jar as like a mixed fruit, container, the bananas would hardly ever get touched. So there's that. Now moving on to other things other than fruit, and I guess I should mention too, when I did buy this dehydrator, it came with like a little cookbook manual thing. So like, why did you pick 140 degrees to dehydrate your fruit at? Well, it's because that's what the manual kind of told me to do. Hey, fruit, dry at 140 degrees. Okay, sounds good. I'll do that. So that's kind of where I'm getting a lot of my time I'm out, from. And same thing goes with like the fruit leather. It kind of gave me a time, kind of gave me a temperature region or area range. And the same with the jerky. So when you hear the temperatures and stuff, it's based upon the cookbook there, the recipe book that the Magic Meal provided with their dehydrator. So, and not all dehydrators come with one of those. So that was another perk of that one. Moving on to fruit leather, so a little bit more processed good going into the dehydrator, right? Not just simply a fresh raw product or fresh raw fruit. And so I tried a couple different types of fruit leather. I started off with just taking like a quart of my applesauce and then ended up putting about 400 grams per tray. And the recipe book did say, how much grams you should put in for a tray on fruit leather. It came with 2 fruit leather trays, so anytime I talk about these recipes, it's just I'm trying 2 fruit leather trays. I'm not going to go buy more fruit leather trays unless I know I like how the fruit leather is coming out. So I had about 400 grams per tray at 158 degrees, and it took about 6 hours for my applesauce to dry down. When I started pulling away from the edges, that's when I kind of figured it was done, and it wasn't really soft anymore. Kind of felt like more like a leather rubberiness. And it ended up being kind of like that 1/4 of an inch to 3/8 of an inch thick. It starts off a lot thicker than that and really condenses. I know there's definitely some commercial products out there that are very similar to what I had just produced, but I was a little bit surprised at how sticky it was, because the ones you peel off there from the commercial store-bought stuff don't seem like they're quite as sticky, I didn't think. But so I had a little bit of stickiness on the outside, maybe if I was to just pat that down with a paper towel or a cloth or something before putting them in containers, maybe when you pull them out of the container, it would be quite sticky. That being said, I also had to, put them in a Tupperware container. I put a layer down and then put like a piece of wax paper or parchment paper down in between the different layers of the fruit leather strips that I cut. So the trays, are like a 9 by 10 or something like that. And so I cut them into like a, 2-inch by 3-inch square. And to store them in like that size. So I figured that's about the right snack size, for my kiddos. The other one I did was I took a quart of the applesauce I had. I had a bunch of frozen quarts of applesauce in the freezer. Took a quart of that, and then I took a pint of fresh blueberries, and I put that through the blender. So I had a little bit more volume of applesauce. And I thought, I'm going to try it a little bit thicker too, but I had more like an applesauce blueberry combo. And so I put 550 grams of the blended applesauce blueberry combination into each one of those fruit leather trays. Also, again, at the 158 degrees Fahrenheit. And that took like 9 to 10 hours. So making it a little bit thicker added quite a few hours to the drying process there. I don't know. I debate on making them a little bit thinner to maybe dry down a little bit more quickly and then make them more of like a roll-up style versus a fruit leather style. I'd be tempted to try that. I grew up with my mom making these apple roll-ups, we called them, and she's put them in, the Nisco round circular dehydrators that you see, and then she'd lay like a wax paper, parchment paper down, cut in a circle from like leftover from cereal boxes. Right? She'd always peel this open and then she'd make a circle out of it and put it on top of there so it wouldn't stick to the dehydrator trays. And she'd take applesauce and she'd basically thin it down to basically where you can thin it with a spoon, pushed on it, push it outward, and kind of circle motions until it basically smoothed out evenly. And then it was super thin. And then it wouldn't take very long to dehydrate. She'd peel it off, she'd roll it up, and it was like a, fruit roll-up, basically. I keep on thinking of the fruit by the foots. I think of fruit roll-ups, but the folded-up version. It's kind of similar to that thickness. Those are sticky. Mom's applesauce roll-ups, not usually sticky. So I thought that was interesting. And that's why I was kind of like, wow, I don't really like the stickiness of this fruit leathers that this dehydrator made. I think there's some fine-tuning that I could do there with that. Otherwise, I'll try that again. And then one of the big things that I really wanted to do and look forward to was making jerky. I'm like, jerky's so expensive in the store. Like, if I can make my own, that'd be fantastic. So I ended up going pronghorn hunting, which there's an episode on that as well. Got my pronghorn, and I took my pronghorn, made it into burger, and then took some pork, and I blended it all together to have a pronghorn 70% and a pork 30% ratio in my 1 pound packages. And so I'd take out, actually like the Nesco jerky kits, powders, make, seasonings, because most of those are gluten-free, which is pretty nice. We've recently just tried a Lem hickory flavored seasoning, and that was also gluten-free. So my wife has a little bit of indigestion and stuff like that with gluten, so I try to avoid the gluten if I can for making this jerky. And one thing I liked about the Nesco ones is they had like 2 pound batches. And a lot of the jerky mixes are like 5 pound batches, 10 pound batches or whatever. 2 pound batches I think were hard to come by, so I really liked that Nesco brand because of the 2 pound packages. If I remember here, I'll try to get that posted here on the show notes too, so if you wanted to see what ones I found and liked. I know Shields carries them. If you're from the North Dakota area, you know what the Shield store is. There's a couple other Shield stores around too, but Runnings and other places have, jerky packets, pre-made mixes, seasonings. One day, maybe I'll make my own seasoning. I don't know. Probably not. I don't know if I have time to figure out the exact ratio of what I want to do for that. But so I've had this pronghorn pork mix. I did mix in a little bit of the pork just because I wanted a little bit of fat, because otherwise I thought it was going to be pretty lean. And I liked how that turned out. It wasn't very fatty. When you dehydrated it, it wasn't like super greasy on top or anything like that, which was nice. And so what I ended up doing was I followed the instructions on the packet, mixed it in within 2 pounds of burger, and I put that into a meat brand jerky gun. I'll post a link to that too in the show notes here. But the meat brand It's a brand that my brother-in-law is kind of getting into. He's got a grinder, a dehydrator, jerky gun, all from the same company. And I put a jerky gun on my list for Christmas, and so he had my name and got me a meat brand jerky gun. So that's about $60, which isn't too bad. But it puts out a 3/16 thick jerky slice that's about 1 3/16 inch wide. Super consistent. But yeah, if you're curious what the size is or what it looks like, you can check out the Homegrown Fam on the Instagram. And I just recently posted, the results of what this jerky looks like and everything. So check that out. But I did that jerky at 158 degrees Fahrenheit. I think you can do like 165 also. The recipe book gave me a range of 158 to 165, I think it was. And then at the 2-pound batch or the 5-pound batch, they both took about 5.5 hours. The 2-pound batch, I did it 5.5 hours, took it off, and it was about the right consistency, dried down to the right amount. When I did the 5-pound batch, which I did recently, but what I do with the 5-pound batch, I took 4 pounds of the pronghorn mixed with the pork, and then ended up adding 1 pound of beef into it, because I was like, oh, maybe just a little bit more beef flavor would be kind of fun, kind of nice. And it didn't end up any more fatty than what it was when I did the pronghorn pork mix alone by itself. Mostly because it's my dad's beef, and he doesn't raise, grain finished beef. It's grass-fed beef, really. And he finishes out with just a little bit of grain towards the end of the season, but not much. So I'm not surprised. It's probably like a 90% leaner or more on the beef there. So both turned out really well. The 5-pound batch was like a full dehydrator. Like I think all 10 trays were used. 2-pound batch is obviously, 2/5 of that. But 5-pound batch, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to set the timer for 6 hours because it's probably going to take a little longer with more volume inside the dehydrator. I wish I would have kept it at 5.5 hours because when I took it out at 6 hours, it was starting to get a little bit farther along in the drying process than I'd like it. It got a little bit chewy on the ends. But that rear fan on that dehydrator definitely, like I said, does things really evenly. And I definitely like that. The one thing I'd say that I did differently between the 2-pound batch and the 5-pound batch also is that usually in the 2-pound batch, I got this tip from my friend Craig. He says usually they have a cure packet that they have for all these different pre-seasoned mixes. And he usually only adds about half the amount of cure packet. Unless you plan on storing it for a really, really long time, which you could do in the freezer if you wanted to vacuum seal it, which I did on some of the 5-pound batch stuff. But if you're planning on eating it fresh over the course of like 2 weeks, maybe you want to add the whole packet, but if you're going to eat it within a couple days, he recommended only doing a half a packet of the cure, which is basically salt, right? And I really like that. I usually only do about half. And on the 5-pound batch, I'm like, well, I pre-stuff I stuff these hamburger bags of pronghorn pork mixes myself. And so I'm like, well, it came out to be like more like 1.25 pounds, 1.25 pounds. So they're a little bit heavy. So by the time I grabbed 5 packages, I figured I had 6 pounds. So I added the whole entire cure packet. Well, I think it came out just a little bit salty in my opinion. So I think I'll forever and always probably only put like half a cure packet in, maybe 3/4 on a slightly bulkier batch. But overall, I'd say half cure packet, plenty good, less salty, tastes just as good. But I really did like the flavor of the hickory. It's a pretty strong flavor of hickory on the Lem seasonings, but I also liked a lot of the Nisco seasonings as well. The original, solid choice. The hickory, I think there was a hickory one I did of the Nesco ones too, and I think I might prefer the Lem hickory over the Nesco hickory flavoring. But yeah, jerky. I've done like 2 or 3 batches of jerky now. I'll definitely continue to do that. I just have to get out and hunt elk or something here pretty soon because my pronghorn meat's not going to last forever. And then one of the latest things I just did was garlic, right? So my brother David grew a bunch of garlic. He gave me a bunch of garlic heads, and I'm like, I'm going to dehydrate a bunch of garlic. I'm going to ground it into powder, and I'm going to make my own garlic powder because my wife and I, we love garlic, and we put it on everything, So we must go through, the 3-ounce containers, which is kind of like that 3-inch tall or 4-inch tall spice container. We probably go through, I don't know, half a dozen of those a year or more of garlic powder. Good. We have been mixing that in with a little bit of fresh garlic as well, so going through a little bit less. But I figured that'd be something kind of fun to try. And so my brother David gave me all sorts of heads of Chinook red and music garlic. And I was able to get a couple 3-ounce containers of the music garlic and more like a half a dozen containers of the chestnut red. Which, the garlic process for this dehydration is kind of tedious because you gotta take all the cloves and the bulbs and take all the peels off and everything, and then you gotta slice them up so they're relatively evenly sliced, which I did use a garlic slicer I found online that was fairly even. But I even noticed that between the chestnut red, which is a smaller clove garlic, that fits in my slicer really easily, those dried down a little bit faster than the other German porcelain style music garlic. So that one there was a little bit larger bulbs, and I actually had to cut them in half and then put them through my garlic slicer. And for some reason they just seemed like they're a little bit thicker, longer, and it took just a hair bit more to dry. I did pull all the garlic off at the same time, which was after about 3 days. Because in order to grind it up in a coffee grinder or a herb grinder that looks like a coffee grinder, you really need to have it dried down really well. Because if you're going to grind it and it's not dried down all the way, you're going to start gumming up, and it's really going to work that motor pretty hard. And so I had it on 95 degrees for about 3 days, but you really got to have it drying down as long as it takes for the herb or coffee grinder to ground it up without making it cake in the inside of the grinder. So plus or minus 3 days. The fun thing about this dehydrator I have here, the Magic Meal 1098, is that it has a 48-hour timer. And so I did 48 hours, and then I just did another 24. And I'd say other dehydrators that I looked at only had like 12-hour timers or 24-hour. 24-hour timers are pretty common. So it was kind of nice to have a larger 48-hour timer. So I turned it on for 48 hours, and we're going to be gone for like 2 days, day and a half. And so I was a little bit nervous, but one of the features I also like about this dehydrator, it has a heat sensor, automatic shut off. So if it gets too hot or something malfunctions, it'll sense it and it'll turn it off. So that's kind of nice. So I do enjoy that feature. So if I have to dry something for 3 days or more than 48 hours, if I'm gone and out of the house, I'm not really worried about it. Obviously keep your distance, a foot from any wall spaces or whatever the manufacturer settings say, something like 6 inches from any walls. So you got to allow proper ventilation for your dehydrator. So always keep that in mind too. So you ask how much garlic does it take to fill up my dehydrator? Well, it takes about 2 medium-sized bulbs per tray. I have 10 trays, so 20 bulbs, probably 30 bulbs. Yeah, I bet you I had closer to 30. There's probably 2 medium-sized bulbs per tray, or about 3 to 4 bulbs per tray with the Chinook red, which are smaller. So I probably went through, probably 40 to 50 bulbs. Probably closer to 40, I guess. But, it took me all a day to do it, to take all the skin and peels off those and everything. And I ended up making about 10 of those 3-ounce spice shakers, right? That I just used leftover from other spices that I used. I put mine in a bigger, like, taco seasoning one that's like 10 times that size. But my grinder got it really powdery. Like, it's super powdery. Almost too much, but if I went any less, then I just had big chunks of garlic there. So I don't know if there's a way a person could make it so it's less powdery and more like granular, like salt. Kind of doubt it. And so this is one of those things that I kind of thought of would be kind of fun to sell on the side maybe sometime or something like that. But the amount of effort it takes to make the powder, I don't know if it's worth the time. Because after I talked to some friends of mine, I'm like, well, he makes some powder. He usually does it from leftovers that he has in farmer's markets, some smaller cloves that didn't sell, or then he grind them up and make powder out of it. Well, he sells 3-ounce container for $5. And then my brother is over here selling 2 heads for $5. 2 bulbs. So I'm like, yeah, it doesn't quite add up. So, especially the time. So you're basically selling it for the same amount. Actually, even less, because it takes like 3 bulbs, a tray and a half, 3 to 4 bulbs to get a 3-ounce container, and here you are, you make $10 off the same container. So you can almost make a double off selling fresh garlic versus trying to sell your powder. So if there's any of you out there thinking you're going to try to sell powder and make money, I don't know about that. The amount of time you spend doing it, I don't know if it's worth it, but it is something that nobody else really offers. And so rather than, waste your garlic that you're trying to sell fresh or something, you can preserve that value and at least get your money back, basically, probably. So, yeah, so I thought that was kind of neat. So, yeah, use a garlic slicer to kind of get your slices evenly, or just use a knife and stuff, but it's easier to just put the garlic on there, push down, cut, which is really nice. So the cutting process is pretty simple and quick. It's just the peeling process that takes forever. Try to get my daughter to do it. She really liked doing the music garlic because they're big and she can peel them pretty easy. But then just red ones, she's like, "Yep, Dad, see you later. Bye. I'm gonna do something else now." I definitely don't blame her. So yeah, that's what I've all tried with a dehydrator. And currently, definitely doing a jerky again. I'll probably do garlic once annually, just to get half a dozen containers of powder each year for personal use. I'll do apples again, kind of as they get less crisp, in the storage. I'll start doing some of those again. I'm looking forward to maybe trying grapes. So one of the things I'm going to plant at the new property is going to be these Somerset seedless grapes, which make great raisins. My brother David's been doing that for quite a while. I almost got him on the podcast tonight to talk about some of his dehydration efforts, but maybe I'll have to save that for another day. So I'm looking forward to trying that sometime. Maybe trying to do some other things, maybe like blueberries or something like that travel easily and be quick snacks for kiddos. Otherwise, yes, that's been my experience so far. I definitely enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more. Maybe one day I'll get into freeze drying, but for now, sticking with the dehydrator, put my efforts there. And if there's anything that you want me to try in the dehydrator that you're curious about and don't want to go out and buy a dehydrator right away and not know if it's going to work, shoot me an email at homegrownfam@gmail.com, or you can also message me on Instagram at @homegrownfam. I'd be curious if there's something like, hey, you should try this. And then maybe I do. And let you know how it goes. So, yeah. Let me know. And please rate the podcast. Helps kind of get it come up in search engines a little bit more often and more people will listen to it. Please do download the episodes. I know you can just stream it, but the host platform that I use called Buzzsprout only tracks downloads. And one of the coolest features is that it kind of tells me, if you download it, how many people downloaded it from here, how many people downloaded it from there, how many listens you got downloaded, but if it's not downloaded, I don't even know. I kind of know a little bit more when it tracks in like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, because you don't need to download it there. But they don't give me that cool information of from where did you download it. So for example, I've got people from like Norway, London, this last episode. I always have a couple of listeners from Germany, probably Dad's foreign exchange student back in the day. Appreciate you continuing to download, continuing to listen. That's kind of awesome. And then one of my most prominent areas that people listen to or listen from, Chanhassen, Minneapolis, St. Paul, that region, collectively probably has the most listeners every single episode, almost every single episode. Minneapolis is holding down the fort currently on my latest episode, so go Minneapolis. Thanks for your support. And please continue to support. And that being said, too, there is a support the show link down in the show notes. It literally brings you to this website called Buy Me a Coffee, and you can make a $5 donation, single-time donation. You can make a recurring donation, $20 donation. Help provide the caffeine for some of these late nights, staying up or early mornings, editing these podcasts and things. So I do appreciate that. And it always kind of keeps me motivated, maybe I'll delay this episode for another week and then put it out. Oh, well, I just got a copy here, so I should probably put it out this week instead, So if you enjoy the content and want to persuade me to keep on keeping on, that's how you do it. Anyways, thank you all for listening, and until next time.